A lot of your life is driven by pain. And it's a brutal thing that none of us really want to swallow, because to actually be honest about that requires that we now start doing something in order to change. So we like to simply avoid that, and that only leads to more pain, more unnecessary suffering. We like to think that a lot of our decisions and actions are based off of things like reason and logic and like this critical thinking. But we actually kind of just lie to ourselves. A lot of our behaviors, a lot of our worldview, a lot of our beliefs, they're actually based off of inner pain and just simply the avoidance of pain. This is what is controlling a lot of our behavior. And I want to actually start to discuss this so that you can start to become more aware of this dynamic and learn how to relate to this dynamic in a way that actually serves you rather than in a way that is unconsciously making your life worse. Because avoiding pain isn't this horrible thing. It's pretty nice to not want to jab a knife through your hand. But when it comes to the avoidance of emotional pain and stored pain within the psyche as well, this is where things actually kind of begin to backfire. We can have all sorts of behaviors in our life that are strictly just coping mechanisms or ways that we just avoid certain parts of our own psyche, and they remain repressed. And when they're repressed, they are still having massive impacts on our lives without us even knowing it. So we like to think that, what we're doing and what we're thinking and all this stuff, it's reasonable, logical, it's hard, critical thought. But in actuality, it's just like this shadow stuff, this unconscious phenomena that's really pulling all the strings. Around 95% of your life is actually controlled by unconscious conditioning. It's not even actually controlled by you so much. So a lot of your life is organizing around the avoidance of pain. Let's just talk about this one in a little bit of depth so you can kind of grapple with this idea. A lot of your behavioral patterns are simply ways to avoid emotional triggers. So a lot of people unconsciously actually just structure their life in a way to just avoid pain. So for example, someone with abandonment fears might overcommit to relationships in order, or just avoid them entirely. I think a really good example is the phone nowadays, though. I think this is just like the prime example that we're all kind of facing, that there's so much distraction, so much stimulation, and we can be bored, sad, anxious. We don't really know what to do with our lives. We don't have much of a vision for our lives. We're kind of lost. We don't find meaning or purpose in a lot of things. We don't have anything greater to really aspire to, right? We just don't have that vision. We don't have anyone to motivate us or to help guide us. So we just kind of get lost in pleasure. We get lost waking up and scrolling on our phone and on Instagram and reacting to a lot of the bullshit and sickening cultural trends that we see. And this kind of fills up a lot of our psychological space. And really, when we start investigating why we really want to do all this stuff, like I said, lack of vision and all that stuff I said, but even beneath all that stuff, there's just pain. There's just pure pain that we don't want to actually experience, that we're just trying to avoid. So we have physical things that we do, like grabbing our phone and scrolling on it in order to cope with emotions, in order to cope with pain. Of course, even overeating or just kind of remaining on the couch all day. Various aspects of your career can literally be built on this. And they are. You can really look into every domain of your life and start applying this lens of like, how am I actually avoiding my own unconscious pain that's actually stored in me, right? Look into your relationships, your career, your health, your daily habits. You'll find it. This is a very useful sort of lens for actually cleaning up your life. This is an incredibly powerful lens for seeing the truths that are controlling you, but you don't really want to admit those truths, because even to come face to face with this truth, that a lot of your life is just the avoidance of pain, this is something that's already hard to actually admit. And again, I want to make a clear distinction between like physical pain that actually harms your body versus repressed pain and emotional pain and psychological pain that is highly unnecessary. So we create routines, habits, and even identities designed to shield us from pain, often at the expense of growth or authenticity, typically both growth and authenticity. So our entire sense of who we are can be built around the avoidance of pain. And our ego, our sense of self, is exactly that. Our ego is a defensive mechanism that we use to actually simply avoid pain and navigate the world. And it's our sense of self, really. You can check out some of my older videos on ego. I uploaded them fairly recently. But we can kind of think of the ego as this sort of like inner trickster, using kind of sleight of hand and deception and the redirecting of our attention to kind of control us while keeping all that unconscious stuff that we don't really want to see hidden. That's like a prime element of the ego, a prime element of human corruption, really. So we can talk a little bit more about where this inner pain comes from. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have a good idea. Childhood, trauma, societal conditioning, these are the core things that actually begin to construct that conditioning. So we can go into childhood trauma, maybe neglect, being overly criticized, basically unmet needs and unmet emotional psychological needs. Right? So unmet needs, I'm including this in a more broader category, not just for food and shelter, but to actually feel cared about, to feel unconditionally loved, to be given full attention, to be very carefully attuned to. We have unmet needs that have never been resolved, and the pain of not getting that need met replays itself, of course, in relationships and in career as well, in every domain of your life, because your psyche is now wired to try to avoid that pain. So every time that pain tries to surface or some kind of external circumstance begins to mimic that, you get reactive or avoidant or distracted. Of course, your mind never says like, hey, like, look what's going on. Like, we're avoiding it again. It just starts acting this stuff out just like that, just like a conditioning. And it's extremely tricky to actually start to notice this stuff because it requires a very subtle attunement to yourself. It requires a lot of honesty as well. And it requires a lot of emotional intelligence as well. All this stuff is kind of tied together within emotional intelligence, being self-honest, being self-aware. Because to actually come face to face with this stuff requires you to learn how to actually process emotions, how to be radically honest with yourself to the point where you don't want to always be hiding stuff from yourself. It requires a lot of courage as well, because most of humanity totally avoids their inner landscape, their inner world. They're always distracted by the outer world, distracted by you name it. I'm sure you're familiar with it by now. So trauma as well, events like heartbreak, betrayal, things like this, various life experiences can leave lasting imprints on us. And then we don't really want to revisit that pain, essentially. We don't really want to revisit that wound, even though we know, like deep down, if you're kind of listening to this video and you're sincere about this kind of work, deep down you actually know you have to actually revisit that pain that's stored in the body in order to actually heal it and start to change the patterns of your life, or else that part of you is going to be stuck in time. It's kind of frozen there because that's how trauma works. And it's just going to repeat itself over and over and over and over again. Again, you built a pattern around this. It's going to just replay itself. And societal conditioning. So certain beliefs we have about success, appearance, or how we should live our life, various ideas that we pick up from the environment can also be very destructive. Culture is very sick. Especially nowadays, it's very easy to see it. There's no real massive world culture that is extremely healthy. It just simply doesn't exist. And I'm not really trying to offend any culture here, but I'm trying to just be as direct as I possibly can with this. It's hard to actually discover what a healthy human being looks like because we're so easily misled. And so few people read a lot of books, for example, on what does it even mean to be a healthy human being? What is self-actualization, for example, which is the higher levels of psychological development and health, actually. We don't really read too much on diet, on like our liver and how that works. We don't really read too much on what actually is a healthy relationship. Like, what does that really look like? And start, experimenting with things and really just kind of researching it and understanding and experimenting with stuff. Not a lot of people really do this. We kind of just assume that we kind of already know how it works. We know what life is. We run on a lot of background assumptions that we've been conditioned by. And again, to start to come face to face with those assumptions, yeah, that can be an experience of uncertainty. That can be an experience of not really knowing. That can really begin to put your whole worldview into question and start to radically change the trajectory of your life. You could have to quit your job. But is it worth it? I'll let you decide that for yourself. And again, you can see how really challenging a lot of these assumptions that we really hold as true can also lead to more pain. No one really likes the experience of feeling uncertain or not knowing, or sad at the feeling of being wrong. Right? We don't really enjoy this. This isn't something that we wake up and look forward to. This is the stuff we want to avoid. And I'm saying that, yeah, our mind creates structures around avoiding this stuff, and it actually controls a lot of our life. And to actually build a healthy and meaningful life, you're going to have to go through all this stuff. You're going to have to go through your own inner landscape, your own inner psychological, emotional world. In order to evolve spiritually, good luck getting enlightened when you have a whole bunch of bullshit stored in your mind. It's won't work. So we have a lot of avoidance mechanisms, as I've discussed, right? We distract ourselves potentially with work, relationships, substances, screen time, or just avoid sitting with our uncomfortable emotions in general. Personally, I really find it slightly funny, to be honest. I might be cruel. But I find it slightly interesting as well when a lot of people simply don't want to meditate. They're very, very sort of, I've seen a lot of these people in my comments actually, being on YouTube for so long, anti-meditation, anti-sitting there and just being with yourself. Stasis leads to death. This is an actual comment I received. And from my point of view, I know what's really going on. The mind literally knows, it unconsciously knows that if I sit there and I start facing this stuff, this is going to change stuff. Like, I'm going to have to feel that pain. I'm going to have to reorganize my life. There's going to be a lot of upheaval that comes with that new awareness that I have. Things are going to start to shift and change. And yeah, emotions are going to come up. It can be challenging. It can be difficult. That's all very valid. But I find it very interesting to see how, we delude ourselves. We actually just convince ourselves of these falsehoods in order to just avoid it in the first place, just to already avoid the pain of it. We can't even do step one of admitting that I need some kind of structured practice in my life that will actually help me to be aware of myself, to process emotions, to watch my mind, to be in my body. To even admit that to yourself, that, yeah, I need some kind of structure in my life daily that's going to help me with my own psychological well-being, my own awareness, cultivate myself spiritually. To even admit that to yourself, that, yeah, I need that. This is already a big jump forward. To be at the point where you can even admit that that's something you need as a human being, this is not something to take for granted. This is already an impressive, above average level of development within human beings. So when pain is avoided, it often manifests as defensiveness, fear-based decisions, overcompensation, like people-pleasing or perfectionism, or just reactivity as well. So we have all these like reactivity-based behaviors that are very unconscious that all they throw us into this sort of fight or flight and just overall dysregulated state, giving too much energy, essentially. We're exerting too much energy, too much. These behaviors keep us exhausted, they keep us drained. They're literally like sucking our energy, and we give it to things that don't need it when we are actually in need of it. So a lot of these patterns are unconscious, like I keep stating. What does that really mean? So these avoidance strategies create autopilot behaviors, meaning that you do them, you're continuously doing them, and you're not really paying attention to it. You don't actually see that you're doing it, can be one. And another one, you can actually start to see that you're doing it, but you're so ingrained by the pattern. It's so deeply ingrained in you that it's hard to break out of it. And this is often the case when people are first becoming aware. They're seeing that they're stuck in these patterns, but they don't really know what to do or how to make that long-term change so that they're they successfully kind of like identity shift and heal and all this kind of stuff, all this fancy stuff. So these old wounds dictate how we react to situations, making us feel stuck or out of control, like we can't really do anything to change our situations. And it kind of just leads to like this other cycle of just remaining stuck, like seeing the pattern, not really knowing what to do from here, and then we're kind of stuck back in it because that's just how they work. They're deeply ingrained. You think that you're just going to like quit like that, but it's really hard. The second it's ingrained in you, it also becomes addictive because it's actually a part of your sense of self now. It's wired into your psychology, it's wired into your emotional system, it's wired into your nervous system, it's wired into your physical body. So to actually just get your coping mechanisms and just rip them out, people actually react like addicts when that happens. They just like, it gets pretty intense actually. Right? You can't just kind of quit it cold turkey. So of course you can actually begin to see how this would impact your career, your relationships, your health as well. These suppressed emotions, your overeating, your diet patterns, eating a lot of garbage food, not enough, let's say, organic fruits and vegetables, not drinking enough water, drinking too much Coca-Cola instead, not having some nice fruit smoothies. You can see how you're just going to lack giving yourself the actual vitamins and minerals that you actually need in order to be well. You're also going to see how, this is going to take a massive toll on your psychological, emotional system. The repressed emotions in your body are actually going to have lasting impacts, again, on just simply on your physical body. I don't really have to get into too much detail about how this is going to manifest in your relationship because I'm sure you can probably put it together yourself. I'm going to assume you're smart enough to. But, I'll give you a couple examples. Reactivity, lashing out at each other, repressed feelings of sadness or avoidance or like dependency on the other person in order to feel complete. Your career as well. You might just lack the motivation to take action on some kind of creative idea that you have or that thing that you really want to do. You might also just fear failure. You might just always be burnt out. You might fear the opinions of others in your career way too much to the point where your career doesn't become an expression of your soul. It becomes a way that you just kind of remain stuck in a box. So I want to talk about how to actually heal and start to break free. I want to give you just a quick list. Of course, I mentioned mindfulness meditation and just overall mindful awareness. This is like the most important thing that you can actually do, right? If you're just a very typical, normal, ordinary human being, this is like very fundamental. Because what you really need to do is to learn to step out of your patterns, to observe them neutrally, to stop being so identified with them and always just acting them out and to just start to watch them. You create that inner psychological space rather than always feeling so tense and closed all the time. You create that inner space, and just by watching, just by being aware, you can actually start to heal it. Your awareness alone is a healing phenomenon. It's curative. So just by being aware, you start to shift your behavior over time. So observing your thoughts, emotions, triggers without judgment, noticing patterns in how you react to situations and tracing them back to underlying pain. That's all very important. And that's something that you really learn how to do through meditation, and especially body practices, mind-body practices. So yoga, breath work, body scanning, because a lot of the pain is stored in your body. So you need some kind of way to access that, or else you're not going to make that shift that's actually needed. Emotional release and processing, so allowing yourself to feel your emotions, just giving yourself structured time to just feel and practice feeling and being in your body. This is all very important. Journaling, therapy, safe spaces are all really important. Crying, shaking, shouting, releasing pent-up energy stored in the body. This can also be very valuable. What does your body want to do? Does it want to move? Does it want to dance? Does it want to cry? Does it want to meditate? Right? And be very honest about like what would really give you the shift that you actually need. Sometimes it wants to move. What are the needs of your body? Right? And again, just be very, very honest, right? Because it's the mind can be very deceptive here. We really want what's true here. What's true about this is going to really lead to that breakthrough that we need. So inner child work is very important, revisiting your past wounds while also developing compassion towards your wounds. That compassion element is really needed. Without that ability to be compassionate towards your own inner child parts, it's going to be very difficult to heal because the inner child is quite literally a child within you. It's all those hurt child components that still have the consciousness of a child. It's stuck in you, and you have to relate to it from the point of view of being a parent towards your own child, meeting them with love, awareness, your full undivided presence and attention, and just pure care. So imagining your younger self and offering the love and reassurance that they lacked, right? That's very important. Rewiring your story as well. So learning to challenge a lot of your thoughts, not just believing all these limiting beliefs that you continuously tell yourself on repeat. Learning to just challenge them and recognizing that they're formed by wounds. Things like I'm not safe, I'm unworthy. Learning to actually just challenge this and feed those parts of your mind that need to feel that sense of worthiness and self-esteem. So generate 10 reasons per day, write them down in your journal, why you're actually worthy. And start to just continuously feed that part of your psyche that's actually just being neglected. In the same way how if you have a vitamin C deficiency, right, you're gonna be ill, right? Your mind needs that nutrient as well. Your mind needs that vitamin, I mean. And without actually proactively feeding it that, you can expect it to have that problem. Another core point is actually just seeking the support that you actually need, ensuring that you actually have like-minded people around you. This is very important. Connect with the people that you have to connect to. This is going to benefit you tremendously. Just benefiting from the company of the wise. This is something that is without a doubt needed. If you can find those people, congratulations. If you can get access to them in online communities, very valuable. Speaking of which, I'll be making an online community maybe in the next month or two. I'm still just kind of planning stuff, working it all out. I'm getting clear about how I'm going to structure it, just technical stuff and stuff related to my own personal vision on it. So your old wounds don't have to control your life. You can actually heal, shift, change, and actually feel more rejuvenated. Feel like you're not always giving so much energy, not always feeling exhausted, cutting out the distractions once and for all. Once and for all, no more phone. So you create the freedom basically by healing these parts of yourself, by coming into contact with these parts of yourself. And this allows you to really up-level your consciousness. Because it's hard to raise your consciousness if your psyche is very fragmented. Because the whole point of spiritual work and all this stuff is to come into deeper levels of wholeness. Right? True spirituality is just simply finding wholeness already occurring right now. Wholeness within the very nature of existence, the oneness of being, wholeness within your psyche, wholeness within your emotions, wholeness within your physical body, making sure your organs and your brain, all this stuff works together, cleaning it out, right? Doing heavy metal detoxes, for example, right? Allowing everything to just function smoothly together, all these levels of existence in life, all working together synergistically, right? This is kind of the ideal. So a core part of this is the willingness, courage, and honesty to confront the pain that you've been avoiding. Take the first step. I'm sure in 5 or 10 years, you're actually really going to appreciate simply putting that time, energy, and attention and all those resources into this kind of work. That's it for this video. If you're interested in working one-to-one with me, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Take it easy.